how will the release of Space Marine 2 affect Helldivers 2?
Great question, Easy. Chat, how will the release of Space Marine 2 affect Helldivers 2? I honestly don't think, like Gigant has just said, that Space Marine 2 is just going to delete Helldivers 2. I think that's hyperbolic. I don't think we're going to see a situation where Helldivers just completely gets deleted off the face of the earth and it's got as many players as Concord has. I just don't think that's going to happen. There's so many people out there who absolutely love Helldivers 2. You've got to remember, folks, that whilst you see me, Thick, Pips, Erevin, Clay, unpicking the game and talking about, oh yeah, you know, this isn't right, or this should be better, or they need to buff this, or these nerfs are stupid, or this is too easy. There are so many people, so many thousands of people playing Helldivers 2 that just don't care about this. They just don't care. They come in from work, they've got a family, they've got a load of screaming children that have just gone to bed, and all they want to do is turn on Helldivers, drop in, cup of tea, cup of liberty, maybe a beer, stick their headphones on, and just have an hour or two of just playing a game that fundamentally is actually really fun. And they might be playing it on difficulty 5 or 6. There is always going to be a player base for this game. Let's talk hypothetically. If Space Marine 2 comes out and it's absolutely insane, it's like the best of the best. It's game of the year. It's the best game of this type that's come out in ages. It wipes the floor with Vermintide, Darktide, Helldivers. It's got everything absolutely top notch. If that happens, Helldivers 2 still won't be dead. That's my take. I think you can only look at other games. Like, games like Deep Rock Galactic still have a player base. If you look at the numbers for Deep Rock, if you look at the numbers for Darktide, which are all horde shooters, it's cyclical. And I did a video about this. Update comes out, holds the players, and then it nosedives. World of Warcraft, expansion comes out, boom, and then the players tail off. The problem Helldivers 2 has is that they've brought out big updates multiple times, epic patches multiple times, and they have fumbled them over and over and over again. And you can see it. You can see it on the graph. If we could pull the graph up now, it'd be great. And if I make a video out of this, I will be putting it on the screen now. You can see the bits where new updates have come out. Like when the mechs came out, that was a massive moment. Remember how hyped everyone was for mechs? Mechs are going to be sick. There was like news footage about it before the game even came out. And they were just meh. Dropping them in once every 10 minutes, twice in a mission or whatever it is. And that is the issue Helldivers has. It's this ascension of people picking the game up again, and they come in and they're like, oh, you've nerfed my favourite weapons and my loadout sucks now, and the thing that you've added is actually pretty lackluster. Nah, see you later. And then it goes, and every time that happens, it goes up and down a little bit quicker, and people are tired and wary and weary of this now, and no one believes what they're saying. And you know me, folks, I'd say out of all the content creators out there and players in general, I try to be on the positive side. Like, I enjoy Helldivers. I'm not a shill. I don't sit here saying, oh yeah, it's perfect, Arrowhead are doing a great job. They're fumbling stuff left, right and centre, but the game is fundamentally good, and I believe that it will be better in time. It just isn't going to die. That isn't how it works. There will always be a core of people. So, in answer to Easy's question, I don't think it's going to kill the game, but what I do think is it is going to heavily hinder what they've made, what they've got. Surely they're looking at Space Marine and they're like, yo, this game's going to absolutely pop. We have not got a chance at the moment, given what's happened over the last few months, to undo this. We might as well just take our time with this big buff patch and just get it out in this window we've given. Don't put it, like, please, Arrowhead, don't put the patch out on Tuesday or Thursday next week. Please don't chuck a patch out sort of quickly just to try and, oh, don't all leave the game. And I don't think they will, because I think they're confident in their product. Lola says, people don't understand how much of a zeitgeist this game became. It's so overly successful. They'll probably settle in the range of players that is still above what they planned for. Yeah, and I did a video about this probably about 2 months ago when all those initial stories were coming out about, oh, look at the numbers, like the game's dead, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to repeat myself. It's cyclical. Games like this are cyclical. Horde shooters are horde shooters. They're not doing themselves any favors, though. That's the problem. They're not doing themselves any favors at all.
How will the release of Space Marine 2 affect Helldivers 2? Well, that's kinda awkward, because even though I'm making a video on that, it's a tough question to give a solid answer to, because we don't even know if Space Marine 2 is good. It looks fantastic, and they're hitting on all pre-release marks, but looks can be deceiving. I'm sure we've all been fooled by pre-release hype before, and I heavily recommend waiting to purchase this game until you have heard reviews from people that you trust. Speaking of, I will have a first impressions and review of this game when it releases next week, so subscribe and hit the bell if you want to see that. Anyway,
sub to Easy, he's a great content
answering
creator.
The question of will this game kill Helldivers 2 is kinda impossible. People can guess all they want, but we will never actually know what happens until it happens. But one thing I can tell you for certain is, at the very least, Helldivers 2 and Arrowhead should be threatened by Space Marine 2. Let's get this out of the way, because I know someone will comment it. The two games are very different, for sure. For one, Space Marine is putting a large focus on their campaign and PvP, two things that Helldivers doesn't even have. There's also a huge investment into melee combat, another thing that Helldivers completely lacks. The only real similarity is that both these games are PvE horde shooters, but Space Marine doesn't feature procedural generation and instead has pre-made PvE missions, meaning that it won't have the long-term replayability that Helldivers has, at least from a gameplay perspective. Even so, I think there's still reason to believe that if Space Marine 2 sticks the landing, Helldivers 2 could be in trouble. For one, I think a lot of Helldivers players are playing Helldivers simply because they enjoy good PvE games.
Question to your chat. If Space Marine 2 comes out and it's a banger, and then a month later, Helldivers bring out this insane update with boss encounters and buffs and a new game mode, are you gonna just say, nah, sorry, see ya? Like, have they burnt their goodwill with you so much that you would not play the game? Put a 1 in the chat if you would absolutely in a heartbeat go back and play Helldivers if they bring out a banger update. Put a 2 if you won't, if you're done with them. You just can't be bothered anymore. So I'm gonna put 1. Turnal says he'll stay with Helldivers. I'll play both, to be honest, and that's my plan. I'm going to be playing both, 100%. If I'm making content for Space Marine 2 and Helldivers drop something interesting, I'm going to make content for it and play the game. I'm going to be streaming it. I'm going to be doing the usual things that we've been doing for the last 6 months. We've been having an absolutely awesome time. I like Helldivers now. If it gets better, great. I'm in it for love of the game. Yeah, and I feel the same. I feel exactly the same. This idea that Helldivers is in trouble because of Space Marine, I don't fully sign up to. I understand it might hurt the player base initially, which is normal for a game within the same genre. If something new and fresh comes out, people go check it out. Any World of Warcraft veterans in here? Remember when Rift came out? Remember the MMO Rift? And how it was the WoW killer? And like, I did it. I was like, yo, this looks sick. Jumped over. I played Rift for about a month and was like, I'm done now, I'm off back to WoW. It's the same genre. One was really good. Rift was really good, and it had its own kind of niche. It wasn't as good as World of Warcraft, in my opinion, and I went back to World of Warcraft, and that's a very different analogy. But I'm just trying to say, I don't think that just because these games share a genre, that everyone's just going to jump ship and never go back to Helldivers. Initially, they will, but every game has its things that we don't like about and what we do like about them. Infamous J says, I'll play everything. I don't know why people put one or the other, both and play both and enjoy. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Obviously, this does not speak for everybody. Surely there are a lot of players out there that only play because they love the Galactic War and the metagame that surrounds it, or maybe they're Helldivers 1 veterans. It doesn't matter. There are plenty of reasons to play Helldivers besides the fact it's a PvE game. But realistically, there are a lot of us that just want to play a good PvE game. I know for me personally, I'm just going to follow the good gameplay, and I think a lot of players will end up doing the same. So I don't think it really matters if the games are fundamentally different in a lot of ways. All that matters is that they're in the same genre. Similar to Deep Rock and Helldivers, those games are very different, but there's a ton of overlap between the communities. All that will matter is who does it best. Gameplay.
Yes. So, I literally was playing Deep Rock Galactic back when they did that recent Season 5 update. for about 2 weeks. I was playing Helldivers and Deep Rock, and what was actually really nice about that was I was playing Deep Rock and I was going, this is pretty cool about Deep Rock Galactic actually, and that's when I started seeing things like the Corlock Tyrant Weed and going, yo, Helldivers needs stuff like this in it to make it better.
Play aside, the late game progression of Space Marine 2 has a chance to completely one-up Helldivers. Actually, to be fair, it would more than one-up it, because Helldivers doesn't even have a late game progression at all. And it looks like Space Marine 2 is shaping up to have a lot of it. The PvE and PvP modes will have their own separate progression system outside of the campaign, meaning that the more you play and level up, the more weapons, attachments, customizables, and upgrades you can give to your Space Marine. Then multiply all that by 6, because there are 6 different classes that you can individually level and customize. Think similar to Deep Rock Galactic's leveling system, where each class has its own progression. Obviously.
And this is the crux of everything we're talking about. And all the things that Helldivers could learn from this experience, I think, are right in that sentence, or that paragraph, that passage that Easy's just said. Progression systems, like Deep Rock Galactic, classes. I'm not saying Helldivers should have classes, by the way, but this idea, this RPG element of progression systems that you can dig your teeth right into and actually take really seriously and get diversity out of it in terms of your builds and your loadouts, and play around with different setups and stat point allocations and perks and masteries, and needing to go and do things that are beyond just going and picking up some samples in a mission and maybe getting out with them or not. Completing tasks within a mission to get resources that make your character more powerful, and noticeably more powerful. The way the player feels that power increase. It's a sense of progression, and what's progression tied to? Dopamine response. And that's what gaming is, folks, and that's where I feel like Helldivers loses its way a little bit again. You're sitting there, you hit level 50, and then you're just like, bah, what can I do now? And I feel like that, for me, is where Space Marine has got Helldivers completely numbered. There will come a point there when you're playing Space Marine and you've got everything, and you've played everything, and you've done all you want to do. That will come as well. Absolutely.
Obviously, the two are different, but the concept is similar. So even though the PvE gameplay isn't built for extreme long-term replayability, the progression system very much is, which is again something that Helldivers 2 completely lacks. Once you hit level 25 in that game, you're pretty much just playing for nothing, but here in Space Marine 2, that should not even be close to the case. From everything that I've seen and read, it looks like there will always be something to unlock and a goal to work toward for a really long time, and I'd argue progression is the most important thing to keeping a player base long-term.
Agreed.
And I have to mention it, even though it's not everyone's cup of tea, PvP is basically infinite replayability, especially if you play the competitive mode, which I am reading that this game does include. On top of this, I think aside from just wanting a good PvE game, fantasy matters a lot to people. The fact that Helldivers 2 has been so poorly updated and seen its weapons nerfed to the ground is just another reason that people may see Space Marine 2 gameplay and say, man, that's the fantasy I wish I had in Helldivers 2.
PvP being in this game is massive for me, and it's no secret that that's what I'm probably the most looking forward to. I'm a massive PvP player. I haven't covered anything PvP wise on this channel yet, but like one of my favorite games is Hunt Showdown. Like, go figure. But like the PvP in Space Marine 2, if it is absolutely on point, we are going to be laughing, chat.
And don't get my words twisted, I'm not saying that Helldivers need to be as powerful or as badass as Space Marines, but when our super Earth weapons are basically just uncreative standard military guns that feel terrible to use, it's just not a good look. You can't tell me that this doesn't look like a better fantasy than this. Another thing that I just want to throw in here is that there is seemingly a lot of overlap between the Helldivers community and the Warhammer community. I don't have any data to back this up because I don't think anyone's ever taken a poll on Warhammer and Helldivers players, but there is a reason that you see Space Marine 2 being constantly discussed in Helldivers communities. Even before the Space Marine 2 hype, there were always people discussing 40k Vermintide and Darktide and comparing those games to Helldivers 2. So all of that is to say that even though the two games...
Right. I don't agree. I don't know if... Do you agree, chat, about that? Do you agree about the power fantasy thing? Like, I don't know if I agree with him there. And that's okay, we're allowed to disagree with people. I feel like there are people who actually prefer the fantasy, the Starship Trooper-esque fantasy over the we're absolutely ridiculous, basically nearly unstoppable superhuman beings that Space Marines are. You know, angels of death they get called, don't they? There's a difference there. Now, I enjoy both. I enjoy both of those power fantasies, for want of a better phrase. You don't really have a power fantasy in Helldivers. You know, that's the kind of the design philosophy argument we've got going on with the developers at the moment as a community. We want more power and they don't want us to have that power because the philosophy is that we're grunts and we should be underpowered. Big difference. Helldivers will have a space battleship shooting 380 millimeters from the sky. Yes, it does. And, you know, this is what I mean. There's some cool stuff. Like, if you called in a 500 kg bomb in Helldivers and it lands a few feet away from a Charger, a Bile Titan, and an Impaler, and it just, and like a massive breach, say, and it detonates, and the whole screen just goes, you're going to be like, yo, I feel powerful. But the fact is that when you drop a 500 kg in Helldivers 2, in that scenario, and you drop it in, you're sat there whilst you're waiting for it to go off going, let's get the other weapon ready now. Let's get ready to finish off that Bile Titan because it might not even die because we don't know if it's consistently going to do that, even though I've put the thing perfectly where it should be. I've actually got my orbital precision strike ready, which is also quite temperamental because sometimes it lands on the Bile Titan and kills it in one shot and sometimes it doesn't. You see what I mean? That's the kind of stuff that doesn't make sense. And that's just buggy. Helldivers is more playing Starship Troopers or a Special Imperium Guard Force. Yeah, I agree. You're more like the Imperial Guard in Helldivers. That's a good analogy. You're more like it. Like, the way the game played in its early days, it just felt better. It did. It felt better in so many ways. The things that I'm mostly concerned about moment to moment with Space Marine 2 is how this kind of flashy parry system and snapping alien claws off and gouging their heads off with their own scythe arms. It looks cool, but is it smooth? Will it be immersion breaking? Will it get a bit annoying, actually? You know when you're playing, I'm trying to think of an example to compare it to. You know when you're playing games and you have that feeling of like a grapple, or when you lock onto something and you grab something or someone in a fighting game, and there's that sort of jarring snap feeling where you've got that invisible hitbox type thing going on, you snap to them. Like that, for me, is where I could get concerned about whether Space Marine 2 is going to hold its own there.
Games are fundamentally very different. There is a reason to believe that if Space Marine 2 is a banger, Helldivers could seriously be in trouble.
Boss fight.
From what I've seen, I think Space Marine 2 does a lot of the things, at least conceptually, that Helldivers does, just they do it better. Even from a community management standpoint, pre-release, the fact that Space Marine 2 already has a roadmap and Helldivers 2 doesn't have one even 6 months after release just speaks volumes, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I know Helldivers devs had said before that they don't want to do a full roadmap so they don't spoil anything, but we're just so constantly left in the dark on the update side of things.
Yeah.
It's not good. But it's not just the fact that Space Marine 2 is seemingly doing everything right. It's the hole that Helldivers has dug itself into that might be the greatest threat of all. I
keep stopping it because he's saying so many like thought-provoking things. I think his point about the lack of kind of communication and what's actually going on moving forwards, like this whole, we've got a 60-day plan and this is what it's going to kind of have in it, and we're not really going to tell you when the patch is coming, but you guys have been saying this for months now, and you've got people like Thick Fillet who is going absolutely ham with like deep diving into the mechanics and is really kind of a voice of the community for a lot of people. Like, correct me if I'm wrong here, chat, like an easy win here is to get some content creators on side, get them talking to the community, like create that trifecta: community, developer, player. Mike DeCarlis says there can't be a roadmap other than war bonds for Helldivers 2. The strats and enemies are based on our choices. You've reminded me of the other point here. He talks about the roadmap already being there for Space Marine 2. Have we had, like, I can't think of a time where we've had an infographic from Helldivers that's like, this is the plan, this is the year plan, this is where we're going with it, These are where the war bonds are going to be. These are where we're adding new stuff. They're not giving us things to tangibly look forward to. This whole, yeah, we're going to patch the game in 60 days or something, like, you know, we've got a few ideas. We've put some things out there. We're going on Reddit and making comments, and Thick Fillet's talking about it on his streams, having to literally scour Reddit and Discord and Twitter and collate stuff. Like, he's having to do all that. Like, why don't you just release, like, a nice succinct interview, or get on Thick Fillet's podcast? I'm sure Thick Fillet'd have piles stead on the podcast. Like, do it. Get into the lion's den and put yourself out there and say, yo, we've messed up. You're not happy. These are the things we're gonna do. Because I think we all love the game. I do.
Most of the Helldivers community is just apathetic towards the game right now, as evident by its dwindling player numbers, which continually hits all-time lows almost every day now. Helldivers 2 has seriously had some of the worst post-release support on a game that I've ever seen. I won't get into all of it here because it is a long discussion, but Helldivers 2 has really just dug their own grave at this point. The game is at the lowest point it's ever been, and that isn't good with a major release that is looking to compete for players right around the corner. Helldivers 2 dug their own grave, and if SpaceMarine2 really is a fantastic game, it could be the thing that is the nail in the coffin. But all of that is purely hypothetical, based on one thing: if SpaceMarine2 is actually good. And that isn't something we'll know until it's actually in our hands, despite how great it already looks. The chance that SpaceMarine2 could be an absolute banger of a game at the same time that Helldivers is struggling to hold on to its players is a major threat, no matter which way you want to look at it. For this reason, I really hope Arrowhead is hedging their bets. They should have something to release in the next few weeks to attempt to bring some players back, and a simple stratagem or new warbond isn't going to cut it. It needs to be a major update, bigger than the escalation of freedom.
Huge.
Something that comes to mind is the Illuminate. Not that I think it'll actually happen, but if they did drop the third faction, that would be something to pry me away from Space Marine, and undoubtedly bring back thousands of players to give the game another shot.
Day.
So if you want my prediction for what I think will happen,
we'll wait for your prediction, Easy. I disagree with you there, bro. Sorry. I think bringing the Illuminate would be probably a pretty bad decision. I really do think that would be a poor decision, because the core fundamentals at the moment aren't working. The guns aren't good enough. The stratagems aren't working effectively. There's loads of bugs in the game. They're just milling through the same style of mission constantly is getting really dull and boring. They need to sort the fundamentals out before they add another variable into the game in the form of the Illuminate. You're balancing against two different types of enemy at the moment. Imagine when it's three. Like, no. The Illuminate is not what we need right now, and I say that with all due respect, because I think Easy's got some fantastic opinions and some fantastic videos, but I do disagree here quite intensely. I think that I actually have a theory about this. I think that I think that they had the Illuminate ready to go a long time ago, and I think they had some sort of really cool galactic war map thing that's going on. It was around the time I'm trying to figure out when this was. It was when things started to go really bad. It was after the railgun thing. It was around the time the Eruptor and all that kind of stuff was getting patched, I think. I'd have to check my timelines. Maybe someone can help me here. But there was a point where everything just started to fall apart. It was the nerf bats and all that kind of stuff were coming out to full effect. And I think they kind of had to go, whoa, we need to put the brakes on here, because our product is not performing. Around Sony as well, Johnny, thank you. Yes, absolutely. That's around this time. I think they went, whoa, put the brakes on. We're not bringing the Illuminate out. We're not going to do all this cool warfront stuff, because we need to get this sorted. That's my opinion anyway. And it's just a theory. But I do think that I think they're sitting on the Illuminate at the moment. They might even have it ready to go. But they've had to freeze whatever they're doing with them because the other stuff just isn't working. Can you imagine if they released the Illuminate? Just, hey, we've got an update. It's the Illuminate, surprise. Oh yeah, and here's a couple of buffs. But this and this is still not working. You would absolutely be raging, because it would just be like another variable to consider. The community isn't ready for the Illuminate. They need the guns to be balanced. I agree. The game's become less about... Remember when the game was all about Malevolent Creek and Joel and all the kind of Warfront stuff that was going on, and we were save the kids and all that kind of stuff? Like, the community was so behind the fantasy of the game, and it was fun. It was daft. It was silly. And, you know, I had someone come in my stream when I was playing. This was a bit of a random caveat, but I was playing and I was trying to capture some footage for a video, and I cancelled a mission really flippantly, and someone in my chat was so annoyed with me, like, you just stopped us getting points to the war effort, and they were really annoyed with me, and I was like, yo, sorry, and he was actually like, I'm going, and he left. I was like, whoa, I didn't realise some people were taking it as seriously as this. I was taking it pretty seriously, tongue-in-cheek, but man, they were seriously annoyed with me. Seriously annoyed. So I just feel like the Illumina at the moment just wouldn't be the one, man.
I think Space Marine 2 is going to be a great game. Everything, and I mean literally everything I've seen and read about this game looks fantastic. So I guess the only question is, will Arrowhead respond? If you're asking me, probably not. As many of you know, they announced that they'll be making updates to the game over the next 60 days, and since then, not much has happened, and it's been like 2 weeks now. The only thing they've changed is, well, they just broke fire damage more. And since that happened, I have just been completely tuned out of Helldivers. I have no idea what's going on in the Galactic War. I don't know what major order we're on. I don't know what planets we're defending. And
Me neither.
I have no idea what the last update was. I just don't really care. I have absolutely no faith that they're going to have a major content drop to compete with Space Marine. And if those two things happen, meaning if Space Marine 2 really is a fantastic game and Arrowhead has no immediate plans to compete with it, I think Space Marine will steal a couple thousand players on release. Those players will never come back as Space Marine follows their yearly roadmap, and meanwhile, Helldivers will just continue to dip in players as the game fades into obscurity. I wouldn't be totally surprised if come November, sub 10,000 players is the new norm on Helldivers 2. And obviously, I am being really pessimistic here, but I just don't know what other way to feel. There's nothing that Arrowhead has shown me that gives me faith about this game at the moment. But of course, those are just my predictions for what we could see happen. There's always the chance that Space Marine 2 releases, kinda sucks, and has no impact on Helldivers, and both games just kinda exist in their own communities. Also,
yes, that's my belief. He's just summarized what I was gonna say. They can coexist and they will coexist, but I love his points about doesn't even know what's going on in the Galactic War, and that's like what I was just talking about. I used to be so invested in it, and it was funny. Like, it was literally like Malevolent Creek was insane. It was absolutely insane, chat. How epic was Malevolent Creek? And remember the way the game played then as well. It just felt good. I can remember running through the jungle trying to get to the extract on stream with 4 of us, and it was the most fun I've had in that game. Terrifying, actually. Little red eyes in the bushes chasing. Oh man, it was epic. It was epic, and the community took that and elevated it.
There's a reason I said that I hope Arrowhead comes prepared. I really, truly do hope that they have something up their sleeve. Just in case Space Marine 2 ends up being great and they need to make a big move for players. Yeah. In an ideal world, both games are great and they start competing with each other, pushing bigger and bigger updates as they try to one-up each other and eventually just making both games into powerhouse fantastic games.
Great.
Point is, I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Space Marine 2, and I have really high hopes for the game. They are checking every box that needs to be checked, but the real test is right around the corner, the release. Personally, I believe they stick the landing, and Space Marine 2 becomes the next big PvE title, at least for the next couple months. That being said, this is your friendly reminder to not pre-order. Wait until you see a full review or full gameplay, then make your decision. That's about all from me. Take care of yourselves. See ya!
Make sure you go check out the full video and Easy's channel, folks. The link is in the description, along with a link to the Phase Shift Community Discord, where we will have a full looking for group functionality ready for launch of Space Marine. Come check it out. Take care of yourselves, keep having fun, and I'll see you in the next one.